Last week at Las Vegas Fan Fest, we got our first glimpse of the New World. Far from the mysterious continent to the west, we know a decent amount of information about the New World. I purposefully won't be covering much of what was discussed at FanFest, as it's still fairly fresh in everyone's minds, and I'll be waiting to really dive into the lore and background of the New World when the expansion drops. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, as it's really the only way the algorithm notices us. In the year 1497 of the 6th Astral Era, the New World was widely considered to be a myth. Despite the vast amount of ancient epics and historical records that supported its existence, it wasn't until a sea-wolf adventurer from Limsa named Kedenram the Blue set sail to the west across the oceans known as the Indigo Deep. He was determined to prove the existence of the mysterious continent, whatever the cost. He and his crew sailed west for 2 solid months, until finally landing on the shores of this new world. Despite repeatedly attempting to try and name this new land Kedenland, the term New World remained the most commonly used. There is some debate as to whether or not Merwib and her crew were the first Eorzeans to discover the New World. Despite that, their navigational charts were key to establishing the major trade routes to the west today. This was, however, as is all information we've had about what we now know to be Tural, purely from an Eorzean perspective. The residents of Tural didn't consider their own world to be new whatsoever. Tural means to be alive in Azerbaijani, which is an interesting choice given that this expansion is focused on a region that's geographically on the other side of the world from there. Yok is Turkish and means is not, meaning Yok Tural means is not, to be alive. Tuliolal is Swahili for where we are, which will be appropriately accurate for when we are in the city, because it will literally be where we are when we are there. Yaktel could perhaps be a Hebrew word coming from tel or small hill, and Yach, which is a masculine noun meaning hand or wayside. These together could mean a small hill on the wayside or be a small hill shaped like a hand. I should add, however, that the development team for 14 values being consistent, and that having names in a region from 3 different cultures, and none of them being related even remotely to the culture they're emulating, seems odd, to say the least, so take these meanings with a grain of salt. Kedenram and his crew didn't simply discover the New World, however. They spent several months exploring inland and eventually encountered denizens of the nation of Mamool Ja. Kedenram was granted an audience with the nation's supreme leader, to whom he presented various Eorzean gifts from his home. These gifts were rare in Tural and impressed the leader so much that he presented Kedenram with a massive idol made of pure silver, as well as permission to freely travel within the Mamool Ja nation during his stay. Kedenram used this opportunity to map the land and to also gather vegetables and seeds to take back to Limsa. Many staples of modern Eorzean cuisine, such as ogre pumpkins, ruby tomatoes, popotos, and alligator pears, all originated from the New World. While the distance between landmasses has prevented much modern-day interaction between the New World and Eorzea, for the next 3 years, many in Limsa assumed Kedenram and his crew had perished at sea. But in 1500, he made his return, and word of his discovery spread like wildfire. Lominsan set sail for these new lands in search of glory and riches. The 5 years of the 7th Umbral Era saw an influx of Mamool Ja mercenaries traveling to Eorzea to make a profit from the unrest in Aldenard. The Mamool Ja were originally from Final Fantasy XI, but their place in Final Fantasy XIV has evolved over time. The Mamool Ja call the New World Mamook, and Mamool Ja is a name bestowed not only to the people, but the nation of Mamool Ja. The Mamool Ja are not a race, but an alliance of people. The head of the Mamool Ja nation is known as the Autarch, and in Kedenram's time was a 2-headed king. The Autarch's rule binds the various tribes of Mamool Ja together into a singular society. The tribes of the Mamool Ja each exhibit distinct characteristics. The Hubigo have light brown scales and are often seen as melee fighters. The Bunewa are born with deep reservoirs of aether and commonly spellcasters. Finally, there are the Dopro, who are skilled beast herders and riders. The diverse people of the Mamool Ja seldom marry outside of their own tribes, though it's not expressly forbidden. When members of different tribes are wed, however, it's often an observance of certain religious ceremonies. Sometimes, these unions result in a two-headed offspring. These are known as blessed siblings, and are groomed for leadership from birth. When they reach maturity, these two-headed Mamool Ja take command of a unit of their single-headed kin, and leave to form their own warband. These warbands constantly seek to outdo each other in battle, in a contest over who will next sit on the throne of the autarch. The Mamool Ja practice of mercenary work seems to lend itself less as a means of earning wealth, and more as a way of displaying military prowess. We encountered one of these Mamool Ja in Wanderer's Palace hard mode, when the Silver Scales, under the command of Mamool Ja, forced their way inside. A pair of Huron and Mikote treasure hunters were inside killing Tonberries when they learned the truth about the Tonberries' nature. But as the Tonberries nursed these would-be thieves back to health after showing them their hospitality for murdering their friends, stormed the palace. Claiming to be mercenaries, the Silver Scales were merciless. They murdered most of the Tonberries, and those that survived were locked away deep in the ruins. The treasure hunters enlisted the aid of the Warrior of Light, who then proceeded to wipe out the Silver Scale warband inside the Wanderer's Palace, including their two-headed leader, Mamook Ja. Mamook Ja was born of one of these intertribal marriages. He crossed the sea to Eorzea to win glory and strengthen his claim to the throne. However, once he arrived, he struggled to find work for himself in the Silver Scales. In a bid to make a name for himself in this foreign land, he took the drastic step of capturing a piece of it. But Eorzea's visit to the New World didn't just bring new opportunities for trade. In the delivery quests, the Mamool Ja displays the sacred bathing dance, which is an extremely thinly veiled mating dance that enthralls Gigareju. I can't help but wonder if this is something unique to the Hubigo, or a custom across many tribes of the Mamool Ja. In the Blue Mage questline, we learn about the Wallaki, a tribe that uses blue magic. The color blue is supposedly sacred to them, and this could have a great deal to do with Lapis Canyon. Additionally, we learn that the Wallaki were suffering from an epidemic introduced from Eorzea. This echoes the Europeans' introduction of smallpox into the Native American population. The Eorzean dreamflower, which is used to make the illicit somnus, is also used in a medicine to treat the illness. Traditional Turalian medicines weren't nearly as effective against the foreign illness, and without the dreamflower medicine, it was described as a losing battle. That is, of course, until you manage to arrange for vast quantities of the medicine to be sent overseas to save them. In that quest you did. You did do it. Right? As you can see, while we do have some information about the New World, we only know what we know from Eorzea's perspective. We don't know any of the actual history of the New World like we do with Mericidia. So this isn't actually a whole lot of information. In fact, after FanFest, we have nearly double the information we did before. So let's take a look and see what we learned from the trailer. The trailer starts with a boat crossing the Indigo Deep, which here is neither indigo nor deep. While Limsa Lominsa has many established routes to Tural, this particular venture is from Charlayan, which also apparently has routes to Tural. We cut to a group of Mamool Ja venturing through the jungle, presumably on a warband hunt with Estinian. In the shot of the city, we see a short person in Andean clothing waving at the victorious group as they drag in a large hunt. This is likely a display of prowess for a contender for the throne of the autarch. In a dimly lit temple, we see the Warrior of Light doing battle with a two-headed Mamool Ja, which is a contender for the throne. Perhaps they've heard of the Warrior of Light's exploits and want to claim to be the one who slew Eorzea's champion who saved the world. That would certainly be a strong claim to the throne. Then, Alice A catches a sugar apple. These are also called anon, and they're gross. I hate them. She seems mystified by the power of gravity, but also I'm assuming it was thrown to her since there are no trees close by. Regardless, the point is, it's a real fruit. Ishtola is looking at Mamool Ja texts and starts on a page depicting a single-headed Mamool Ja. On the second page, we see the statue she's standing in front of, a two-headed Mamool Ja with a sword and a staff. Perhaps they were a former ruler, and this statue commemorates their achievements. Perhaps legends say they traversed worlds. Regardless, Y'shtola is interested, which means it holds some kind of etheric significance. Hard cut away from another scene we'll see the rest of later to Rahatia eating a taco. Tacos are primarily associated with Central America, which hints that we won't only be seeing South American culture, but Central. The text for the Mamook pear states that the New World area where it grows is very arid, and that appropriately describes areas in Central and Southwestern North, going by real-world parallels. In addition, Yoshi P mentioned we would see cenotes, or cenotes, in Ñactel, which are sinkholes that have filled with water. These cenotes were used by the ancient Mayans for water sources and occasionally sacrifices. In the Yucatan Peninsula alone, there's estimated to be over 10,000 cenotes. We also see a group of people in suspenders and shirts, which is a very European style of dress. Perhaps there are a good many Eorzeans in the New World, or perhaps Eorzean influence is spread here. Back at the warband, the lighting matches the scene from earlier. Mamool Ja lifts a young one up as other children cheer Estinian and the other victors of the hunt. Meanwhile, Thancred asks the local that gave me a fit about a map of central southern Tural. But I'd like to point out that the Mikote is in suspenders, as are the various people wearing them in the background. It's possible this is a uniform of some kind, but it's still a very Western style that's not native to the New World as far as we know, as it's very Eorzean/European. Meanwhile, Urianger is watching him and getting drunk, and looking after Thancred's gunblade, which is just abandoned next to his empty seat where any kid could grab it and hurt themselves with it. How dare you, Thancred? Lastly, we see the Sharlayan ship approaching the now named Tural. Perhaps the north is known as Mamook? We'll see. And then see the Dawntrail logo. I look forward to seeing what new things we'll learn from London Fan Fest in October. And if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. And we look forward to exploring more lore with you in the future.